Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the webinar, Co-Production of Inclusive Public Spaces. My name is Ricardo Pozo, and I will be the moderator of this panel. Today we are going to address the topic, Rethinking Co-Production and Participation. We are going to have three very interesting presentations, each one lasting 20 minutes. And at the end, all attendees will be able to ask questions or comments through the chat or by raising your hands directly. First, I will introduce Yves Schoonjans first. Check. Yves Schoonjans is a professor in architectural history and theory at the University of Leuven, the Department of Architecture in Belgium. His research is structured in two lines. One, practices and discourses in a recent and contemporary context, the relation between theory and practices. And second, everyday local identity, appropriation and urban development. In 2013, together with Chris Skirling, he initiated the Urban Project's Collective Space and Local Identities Research Group. He was head of the education section, History and Theory, program director of the International Master of Architecture, member of the board and director of master programs, vice dean for international affairs, and is now chair of the research department. So welcome, Yves. It's a pleasure to have you here. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I am going to share my, how do I share? Are you seeing something?
Yes, we are looking at your desktop now. Yes.
Okay. Okay, are you seeing it, my desktop?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, so I'm Yves Schoonjans. I'm going to talk about, I'm trying to minimize this, okay. I'm going to talk about this project, Solidarity Mobile Dwelling, Participatory Living Lab, the co-creation and building solidarity housing for the homeless in Brussels. Probably it's the only project that is not in Latin America. But we thought it was important also to show it because we don't like this division, global north and global south. And we believe that also in Europe and in the States, we have similar issues at play. I especially want to give credit to my colleague Burak Pak, who is a very important element in this project, very active, and also already the SMET, project, and also very active on that project. A kind of prehistory. The Faculty of Architecture has two places, two locations, one in Ghent and one in Brussels, and the one in Brussels is always very active in the city, doing different kind of activities and design studios on commons, on social aspect, on engagement with the city and the different neighborhoods in the city. At the same time, this project is the kind of fusion of two research groups, the research group by Burak Pak, Shift, who is called Alternative Practice for Urban Inclusion, working on urban spaces, especially in Brussels, and Collective Spaces, the one that Ricardo just mentioned is the research group with Chris Skirling and others now also on public spaces and collective spaces and how people are using those kind of spaces in building a kind of neighborhood, building communities. The third very important partner is an NGO, which is called Samenlevingsopbouw, NGO Building Communities, if you translate it with two projects that they did before this project, where we also had some interaction with. The one is called Leeggoed. Leeggoed is the kind of empty bottle that you bring back to the shop and then you get some money back from it. But Leeggoed is in Flemish word, leeg is empty and goed is an item but also is an asset. So it's about the kind of empty buildings that are assets and where homeless people could go and live and to set a better use for the empty buildings in Brussels. At the same time, Woonbox is building units in also empty office buildings in Brussels for homeless people. So together we decided to go for a project funded by Moritz, which is, let's say, a Belgian corporation that grants, a grant holding corporation, which is with the title Solidarity Mobile Dwelling, the co-creation of an alternative resilient housing model for the Brussels capital region. So the main people are the Faculty of Architecture KU Leuven, Burak Pakka and myself, Samenlevingsobo, the NGO, and another NGO, CAW, which is a kind of welfare NGO, and then others who would join. Normally, the Innovirit is a very aiming towards technologies and economics, but in this case, a couple social, economic issues, and where we handed our project and won it. It's more or less a 700,000 euro project. An important image that you see here is the fact that it's a living lab. So it's joining different groups of people into one community to, let's say, to handle this kind of project. And the second image that you see here, this homeless guy who is set on his billboard, "I used to be your neighbor," is an important, let's say, background of our project in the sense that we all care about our neighbors. We try to make from a neighborhood to a community, but homeless are slipping out of that kind of network, but they used to be a member of that network. So how can we bring them, reintegrate them into the city, into the neighborhoods? 3 important issues are being tackled. The issue first is about the housing for the most vulnerable groups, namely for the homeless people in the Brussels capital region, which is more or less 19 communities, 19, let's say, little cities. More than 44,000 families are on the waiting list to get a decent social housing unit. And out of that 44,000 families, more between 4,000 and 5,000 people are living on the streets, without then counting the immigrants and without counting the refugees that's also coming towards Brussels. So how can we perform the kind of need for social housing, the need for shelter, the need for new models for affordable housing? We don't propose a full answer to this, but we propose some possibilities in that group. The second issue that was very important for us was the issue of temporary urbanism and the waiting spaces. So an issue that already popped up in the 90s until today. The city has many open spaces waiting to be developed. With project, you see on the right an image of 2017 and an image of 2020, the same empty lots with parkings with only cars. So this potential to give it back to the community, although in a kind of limited time, to make a collective, to make commons, and the belief in the importance and the empowerment of those kind of temporary spaces and tactical urbanism. Here on the left, you see a temporary project in the port of Ghent, where an empty spot before building new apartments was given as a kind of a seaside beach for the citizens of Ghent. And the third issue is neighborhood involvement, how to come from like I said, Brussels is a quite complex city, but one of the interesting elements that they have is they have neighborhood contracts. So they make a kind of plans to get a lively neighborhood. So how can we go from a neighborhood to a community? And the idea of the project was to bring those 3 elements together towards a kind of quite, afterwards, a quite complex project. So the main issue was, of course, the kind of temporary urbanism and the kind of comments that are linked to that. But if we see who is using those kind of spaces, on the left you see a tactical micro task for the students given in Brussels. On the right, you see a kind of, let's say, use of normally a kind of square that is being taken by cars is now taken by the people themselves. Is that often who are using those spaces are young middle-class intellectuals. And we were wondering, is it also not important that the vulnerable groups can also use those kind of waiting spaces? Who has a right for those kind of waiting spaces? And can we use underused waiting spaces for those more vulnerable people? So the main question is, how can temporary use of waiting spaces be put into practice in a co-creative manner through solidary appropriation with the aim of increasing urban resilience, and what consequences does this have for the domain of architecture and urbanism? Quite a large question, of course. So from this was the start of what we called Solidary Mobile Housing Life project. So bringing together the challenge of those three elements, the homeless, we promised to design, co-design in a living lab 8 houses, to do it in a kind of interactive way. Then also to look for waiting spaces and to use those kind of waiting spaces in the city, and then to give a kind of neighborhood interaction. If you look to the bottom on the left, you see it's an icon. You see houses. The main ambition is not only to build houses and shelters, but to make a small community with those 8 people, and also to make a community and interaction with the neighborhood, that the neighborhood can also use it neighbors again. So this is the kind of, well, quite difficult challenge that we had. Why is it so? Temporary using urban potentials is very important because it's a necessity. It's a negotiation between the owners, between the governments, between the different actors, between the local people, the homeless also. It is an opportunity, but it's also a form as activism, a form to show to different kind of groups of people that those spaces can be used in a kind of interesting and engaging way. So it's important, it's a living lab in the sense that all partners are bringing knowledge into the kind of a project, and it's mobile in the sense that the idea was to create a kind of a model that could be built and used, and then could change from one place to the other, from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, and by this giving actively engaging in neighborhoods in a kind of different way on different kind of sites. It's a quite complex project with a kind of growing network of people and actors. Of course, we have members of the faculty, we have students, we have members of the NGOs, we have the homeless people, but then we have very quickly a whole group of other people that are being linked in a kind of large network mapping of items and of people in a growing, more complex system. Like you see here, suddenly we also have to tackle a lot of technical issues on building. We have to tackle economic issues on let's say, where we get the money to do all that kind of thing. We have a lot of issues on legal issues on the homeless, but also legal issues on, because we're living in a very formal society, on building permits, etc., operational issues, social spatial issues, etc. For us, it was very important also that everybody would go out of their comfort zone, what a lot of schools are doing, but this on the long term, on a project who is now running for 2 years, should be finished now, but is still running, will probably be finished by mid-21. Also out of the comfort zone for the NGOs who had, of course, aims and ambitions, but are not used to work with academics. And of course, with the homeless that are also not used to be in a kind of academic setting. So for us, it was very important to try to find a kind of a home base where it's not so institutional, and we had the luck that our school had the need for extra space, and we hired an empty, well, 2 floors of an empty building from the World Trade Center that would be changed in a couple of years, and that was open for a lot of cultural, education and social means. And we had floor 17 and 18 with a lot of other students and other studios, but also the NGOs had another floor on 21. So we had a kind of an environment where the homeless could pop in, pop out, where the NGO people could pop in, pop out, and students could go in and go out. It's a kind of a semi-room where we had only some heating and some lighting and some electricity just to work in that kind of space. Very important is, of course, is also the kind of process and the kind of fact that you had to do the tracing of the process, because it's still a research project where we try to learn lessons of how a living lab could work and how a co-creation could work. Here you see some of the activities. We had an elective on anti-sites in Brussels and of best practices. We had the design studio, the elective on hands-on building, and then the electives on community building and community neighborhood interaction. At the same time, we had actions by the NGOs of the selection of the homeless. We have urban safaris, many design interactions, skill building, finally finding a site. We also had this red action of COVID-19. There was a bit disturbance on the projects, like a lot of projects, as you know. And then we had also meetings, advisory boards, etc. So a quite complex that are not day in, day out living and working with each other, because my connection is unstable. But of course, with interactions as intensive as possible, but not all the time. So in movements as a kind of complex. I quickly going to try to show you some of the actions. I'm not going to talk all of the actions, but the first actions were quite important. We had a parallel action. First, we were looking, not we, but the NGOs were looking for 8 homeless people that could join the kind of project. And finally, we came out with 8 men between 29 and 55. I can explain later why it was men, but they were searching for people, of course, that would go into a project, what not needing urgent shelter, but in need of want to go into the project of 2 years. Parallel, we started with students with a research elective on mapping waiting spaces in the Brussels region and analyzing the best practices. So top down research, we had a list of empty spaces, of owners. We looked on different criteria, why it could be useful, yes or no. And by many places, we limited more and more until 20 or 30 places that could be handled. At the same time, we made charts of those kind of places with indicators why it would be useful to work there. At the same time, we had bottom-up urban safaris, walking into the city, looking towards kind of possible places, because they're not all listed, trying to find owners and see what could happen there. At the same time, another group of students were analyzing the best practices on 5 different issues, on the issues of the unit, which kind of units can be built, for the cost, the flexibility of the unit, etc. On the community between the dwellers, because it's a very important issue in this project, that it's not about only shelter, but about the community between the kind of people. We looked on how those projects are interacting with the community, with the neighborhoods. And we also looked into the process itself of co-production, living lab, if it was like that, and also to the kind of policies that are what's finished, which kind of policies are they using for the kind of living together of those kind of people. By the end of this elective, the group was formed. We had teachers, also a young architect from BC Architects who joined us, and we paid them to join us in the design studio. We had the 8 homeless people, we had the NGO people, we had staff, etc. So we could start. The next important phase is, of course, the design studio, where the design was partly made. I explain later why it's only partly made. It's a kind of a co-design collective space where all the people has to interact. And there it's very important in the living lab that we use quite different kind of, let's say, tools and different kind of actions. And we had actions like talks in small, because it's not evident for homeless to come in a kind of design studio and interact in a very eager and quickly way. So we had a lot of small scale discussions. We had planned activities as such. Just a second. Okay, so we had also field visits with that kind of with those homeless people. We had different kind of workshops with icons to try to develop means for them to explicit what important elements do they want in the kind of neighborhood that they want, what kind of relations to the city that they have. We had, like, in the bottom on the right, you see boxes tied to measurements, what a kind of small house or tiny house could be. We had the use of different kind of models that are let's build here, because we had those empty floors. We could use with tape how exactly kind of measurements could be. We had 3D interactive models that they could enter into the house and see what would happening. So the importance is that we have a multiplicity of different actions. And what, of course, a very important action is, of course, having, of course, drinks and eats with all the different members in the living lab to connect and to discuss and to start up. We didn't have a fixed site at this time, so we used possible sites of different sizes and different neighborhoods, rich neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, in between neighborhoods, and see what the possibilities and downfalls would be looking from one neighborhood to the other neighborhoods. Finally, we ended in an elective hands-on building where the students, let's say, designed in a kind of workshops where their designs would be, they started up to building their details. Here you see Ken de Koolman, which is from BC Architects, will be the final design after a while. But at the same time, parallel to the students, also the homeless started up skill building. So they started up to learn to make furniture, because they're also unemployed, and it's important to have skills, not only skills to go into the labor market, but also skills to have more kind of, let's say, a time frame, punctuality, and all that kind of elements to be a society, and also to learn to work and live with each other. So they started to make on furniture, because one of the elements is that it would start on building also, but especially also on the level of the furniture. So social guidance will give it in to those people how to work. The final project has been designed by BC Architects. Why? Because it's important that the one design is made by an architect and also can follow up the kind of work of it. And BC Architects, so the basic ideas was it must be a kind of modular house, because it has to be adapted on different locations, and it has to be mobile. So a design was made. You see some of the images. We can talk about this later. And also about the kind of, let's say, possibilities of grouping them, fitting into kind of different kind of ways. Here you see on the right, Burak Pak, my colleague from the other research group and one of the homeless guys. At last, after a long discussion, and it was much harder than we thought, we had finally a place in Jette, in Brussels. And there on the north of Brussels, sorry, and we had a kind of a terrain that was by the local government, and also an possible adjacent terrain, because it's very narrow, that we probably could use, where they would put later on a mosque, but meanwhile we could start to use it. Owner is not evident to, because they are always afraid once you are, let's say, occupying the kind of their terrain, that after a while you cannot be kicked out anymore, etc., etc. So we had discussions on the buildings on the terrain, how to fix it, what kind of collectivity that could happen, what connectivity with the neighborhood that could happen. already in the next year, and the next year we had, PUCP had the elective community building where students were active on the terrain, trying to interact with the neighborhood. Important actions there was made with an action which was called interfence, where we had a kind of fence where we put the kind of project where we could have peeping holes. You can see parts of the project where you meet a kind of possible new neighbors, and where people that were passing by suddenly stopped and were starting to discuss and talk about this kind of project that we had. The research group Alt Shift occupied once in a while the kind of neighborhood with this kind of plastic shape where they have research meetings, discussions on the project. And after a while, also last summer, we started up the collective space workshop with the homeless and some students, and with another professor of our school. And this was very nice because we very quickly saw that a lot of our colleagues were very eager also to participate in this quite complex projects. So we started on the terrain to build this collective space with a kind of hands-on workshop, and also starting up what can we do in that kind of space, how can we use it, can we do urban gardening, etc. Also, students from other school were engaged to the NGO. Radio Solid were two students that are making like radio and then starting to interview and do neighborhood interactions. Finally, the kind of building started in the summer and it's still going on because of COVID. And the homeless are helping to build it. We're not building it on the site because it's a mobile unit, so we're building it somewhere else, and then we will move it to that kind of site because the site is not ready yet. And a very important element, I'm out of time, I'm almost finished. A very important element is the outreach, especially to the neighborhood and the local community. We had festivities, soup, we had this interfence, we had the presentations of also academic and also with governments, seminars and discussions. We had presentations on site and on different locations. Of course, social media, blogs. We go into the newspaper from the university to Le Soir, from this journal, the national journals. We had Facebook, Flickr, and also was part of the Live Project Network, which is a larger project on live projects, where we also were part of. And you can also make your own model by cut and paste, and so you can make your own model and start on building. To conclude, what we found out, it's not fully finished. We still have a second project that is starting up now, which is the proof of concept, because we need to top it up towards a kind of model that can be used as a kind of spin-off. But what is the conclusion? Shortly, I have three. First, on the co-creation process. The co-creation process is a living lab, so it's very important that you can only have a living lab when you are truly believing that all actors have essential knowledge, and it's a kind of joining gives an empowerment to all. You have to believe in participatory action research, a deliberate process through which people aim to transform their practices through a spiral of cycles of critical and self-critical action and reflection. And you see the kind of on the top right, you see our, let's say, theoretical model of co-planning towards co-design, towards co-development. On the bottom, you see the messy reality that is, well, moving up and down and so on. It's very important for us that in this project, we want to start from par towards just the participate action with shared ownership on the research project, community-based analysis, orientation towards community action, and value-driven before profit-driven. And of course, it's very essential that you work in a non-hierarchical way in the whole project, that there is no boss, there is no leader, there's nobody on top, you are all equal. And it's a network practice, of course. The second conclusion is on urban waiting spaces and place-based solidarity. So urban waiting spaces could include place-based solidarity. How can we do it? How can we go for sharing and talking responsibility for everyday places for everybody? The negotiation on norms and values of governing that kind of place, and cross-cutting established social and cultural boundaries that are being challenged in that kind of element. And lastly, of course, the impact on the architectural profession. Again, the idea that we have to work in a non-hierarchical way, and we work much more, we don't believe in star architect, but we believe very much in the shared authorship, that to have really engaged architecture, you need a kind of shared authorship with a kind of critical spatial practice. This architecture and urbanism should be a critical spatial practice. And we also believe very much in the power of design thinking, and also that the architect, beyond the fact that he probably has to make also objects, he also has to design strategies. And designing a strategy is often much more important than designing the building itself. Finally, the last slide, you see the kind of quote by one of the future inhabitants, one of the homeless people. When he had the possibility to go to a flat, he declined this possibility and said, no, I want to finish this project, sorry. I'm not eager to move into a flat of my own. I used to live in a group in this project. I will have my own place where I can pop up into my couch and watch TV, but also with the possibility for collective space where you can ask the others how their day was, a real place to come home to. So they become, again, a kind of neighbor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yves, for your presentation. It was extremely interesting. So please remember to all the people here that at the end of the 3 presentations, we will have a space to make all the questions and comments that you want to do it directly to the speakers. So, secondly, we have Mariana Alegre. I hope, Mariana, are you here? Please let me know if you are connected with us. Hi, Mariana. Hola, buenos días.
Hola, hola. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Mariana. Thank you for coming to our webinar. I will briefly introduce you. Please let me. Mariana Alegre studied law at the PUCP and is Master of Science in City Design and Social Science in the London School of Economics and Political Science. When studying her first Master in Human Rights, she decided to promote urban rights. She has been involved in several researches and academic work, in particular about sustainable urban mobility, public spaces, and urban renewal with social inclusion processes. Since 2010, Mariana is the Executive Director of Lima Como Vamos, or Lima How Are We Going, something so, citizen observatory whose mission is to evaluate quality of life of the Limas and Callao's neighbors. On December 2014, and with the support of Abina Foundation, she founded Occupy Your Street, a strategy that seeks to develop more and better public spaces through participatory processes and promoting citizens' urbanism. She is also a professor in the School of Management, and Mariana researches different urban phenomena, in particular about sustainable urban mobility, public spaces, and urban effervescence of citizen movements. So, Mariana, welcome to our webinar. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, and it's a pleasure for me to be with all of you. It was quite a nice talk, the one before. Thank you, Yves. I really like what you presented. Let me share my screen, and I will be talking with you about about how we are managing to have the citizens' urbanism in public space as a tool to promote equality, but also how we manage to involve people and empower them to be able to defend their rights, the right to the city and whatever other situation they are feeling not quite safe in it. So is it okay? Is it presenting? Yes, let me know, please.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank
you very much. So I will talk about the value of public spaces. We are in Latin America, which we have an amazing big inequality, and the urban inequality is tangible and it is evident in the public spaces. And at the end, I will make some call for urban disobedience in order for you to actually have something to do or to say or to get involved in your lives and in your own context. So this idea of urban inequality goes through through the spatial form, but also through not fair and injustice and inequality in the distribution of wealth, but also in the distribution of the city. So we can have a beautiful neighborhood like this one here in Lima, and also with all the amenities that you need, with all the public services, and also you have so different spaces in other places of the city. So that's the image of Miraflores taken from a drone, and the same day we take this one in a 15 this minute ride in a car distance from Miraflores to Alto Peru y Chorrillos, and you can see how it is quite tangible difference between not only the green areas, the buildings and infrastructure, and the quality of everything that you also need to have in order to live in a good condition. So with that in mind, I want to make a pause, and as yesterday was the election in Chile, and I'm not sure if there are some people from Chile here, probably there are. You can see now the map of the voting and how it is majoritarian, going for the approval of the new constitution, of the process of the new constitution, in all the poor neighborhoods, while the richest one were the three only that voted mostly for not initiating the process. So that way of looking at the map will be showing actually also some spatial inequities that I want to address. And that is the idea of having a more able and more accessible way of living to everyone, and without regarding whatever situation you are living on. And so when we here in Peru needs a place to live, people will organize themselves and will occupy the lands, the vacant lands, which was an absolutely valid fight when people were looking for a right to have a house. But now we also have some kind of powers of markets and transactional processes that actually make more of a illegal market of different assets of the city to actually people that are in need but will not be able to have a house on their own, which is the problem actually, because the government is not providing housing policies that are fair and for everyone that need it. And also the design of the city, when it happens to be a design, is also in a very, very bad shape. So you can see that sidewalk with the pedestrian crossing, which is like someone has made it like on purpose to actually be able to I was about to say a bad word, but okay, to not be able to help and to tease the people walking on the streets, and it is even though it is not on purpose, at the end it is, because they are not taking care of the citizens, neither their needs, and of course not making available some designs that will be useful, and then this is made in purpose. For example, the idea of having, and if you see here, I don't know if you can see it well, but it has some púas, I don't know how to say, like some saw border. No? It is an equipment that is added, that was added to prevent people to be sitting down in these stairs in order to take them and bring them away from that area. So someone, I don't know if it was the government or maybe an angry neighbor, will take the time, the energy, the money to actually think, design, and implement something like this to actually take people away. And this is, for example, in one district here in Lima, that it's like a very, very big deal if you make the terrible crime of stepping on the grass, and you'll need to pay almost $400 to do so in like this really, really tiny small square, which is it's also blocked and useless, because at the end it's not used by anyone. Maybe some of dogs that will be peeing on that area, but it is not actually an equipment that will provide us something more than maybe seeing at it one day when we go pass by. But these absurds and these all different strategies to make our lives difficult are having a base, and they have the roots on the idea of that people do not deserve their cities, and that cities are not for us to actually enjoy them, live them, and be in them. It's more like we have been given the benefit of being able to live in the city we're living, and then we have to be content with whatever piece of whatever trash they will give to us. And it goes so on that, for example, if you see in this picture here at the left, yes, it will be, it was a hot day of summer 3 years ago, and some people decided to get inside this water area, which actually was like a fountain. It was not being intended to be a pool. So when that happens, all the media coverage and all the opinions were about how these people are so unpolite, how these people are so crazy to do that. That's not very good. It's impossible to be living with them like that. So what was the answer from the authorities? Just to bring the police. They are like the local police, and although they look like military, put a lot of signs and start like a big campaign, being able to give you the good message that it is like a step off this space. But no one was smart enough to actually consider why people were doing this, why people were getting in the water. It was too hot. There were no spaces to be able to be more cool. You then need to understand why people are acting so in order to fulfill their needs, because these are only signs of something that is not good for them, which is like a really, really dry city, a lot of sun with no shadow at all, and stuff like that. And that's why we started working with 5 years ago with Ocupa Tu Calle, and we were trying to make people aware of their rights to be in the streets and to vividly use the streets, and to actually being able to, for example, sit in some places that previously will be non-available, because either it was some infrastructure blocking you to actually enjoy the place, maybe a fence, or maybe I don't know, some doors to prevent you to go to a park, or you have in your mind like that you are not you're not welcome in that area. For example, when we make our first parklet, it was next to a supermarket. So people were asking us what they should buy to be there. So this idea of being a consumer instead of a citizen is deeply ingrained in our beings. So that's why we are reacting to that. For example, here in Lima, and it's a shame for me to say it, we have some big parks, like they are like really regional parks for different parts of the city. And for getting in, you need to pay a ticket. Like it was like I don't know, Disneyland. It's, of course, it's a small value for the ticket, but still it's like taking out all the capacities and all the idea of actually being a public space, because if you have the money, you can pay it. And if you do not, you are not welcome here. And that's the way Ocupa Tu Calle was born, with this idea of bringing down the inequality, bridging the gap between rich and poor, and also trying to get more people involved in the process of making their cities a better place to be. So we do it by being able to organize and coordinate and articulate different actors and different resources in order to actually work through 4 strategies, which is occupying the spaces, which is actually the urban interventions and the transformation of the city, but also transforming people, which is much important for us, as we will be able to put on some seeds inside of them, some seeds of this idea of citizenship and of the city, a sustainable city. And so we also work a lot making able to connect ideas. We have a big forum every year in August where people from all over the world, especially from Latin America, came, and they enjoy sharing experiences and making friends and being able to actually put their work to be visible, right? And then we also like to multiply the models. We have a lot of models that we work with some experts, and we put them together so others can actually use them and put them through the making process of them. So this is our methodology in a nutshell. It is not all the details, but kind of it starts when someone, or maybe us, or maybe some neighbor or an institution says, okay, so we have this place, we have the potential opportunity to make a transformation. Then we start building the alliances and defining the actual objective. Most of the times the objective that is bring to us is not usually the one that we actually need to address, as people sometimes mistakes the effects from the causes of some conflict. So then we work a lot through evidence-based tools and techniques, so we can gather all the information from the baselines and from the city and from the people and from the patterns of using it and so. And then we work through also different tools. It will depend the process, for looking to a co-design process, and finally a public space intervention in that stage of the process. Then after that, we make sure to make impact measurements, so we can actually be able to prove that it worked or not, so we can make the amendments. It usually goes in like, we have in the best scenario, like 2 or 3 measurements after the process, so we can also make some changes. We then disseminate the impacts and try to make to the final goal that it is influencing public policy, private practice, and society as a whole, which is the most important. So this is an old one, but we have almost 50 urban interventions being developed in different parts of the city and other cities also. We have worked also through governments and with some tools, and also use technology with this, for example, alliance with the Block by Block project and ONU Habitat and Fundación Avina. And the idea of actually making people able to transform their cities is such an empowerment for them, that they start getting better results, not only in the public space on their daily lives, but also in between their relationship with their neighbors. So they are able then to be together and to fight for some and more rights that they do deserve, you know? So there are some examples here. We we work, of course, with these people in their different, with their different perspective, kids, adults, old people, and try to get through different processes with them so they can be able to take as much as they can, so we don't need to be there forever. This place in concrete is a park that was being selling, well, not selling, but leased to a supermarket for, it was 1.50 soles a square meter, which is, I don't know, 20 cents. No, I don't know the rate of the money now, but I guess it will be $20 cents for each square meter, which is absolutely illogic. And the locals, the people, start to organize themselves and use the intervention as an excuse to demonstrate that the park was actually being used and was not abandoned, as the municipality was saying, to be able to change the uses of the land. Here also, you'll have this in a really, really precarious area, district, a school that was without windows, because here the people will be burning garbage. So here the windows were closed, so the kids will not be intoxicated. And it was known as Colegio Basurita, which is like the garbage school. And it was at the end transformed with the people, not only at the outside, but also in the inside. And we end up having 0% of garbage. We also organize some garbage collection and some place for the people, containers, so people will actually have where to put the garbage. But the impact, which was starting as a more environmental and safe environment for children, turns into something much more, which is we actually help the community and the kids and the families and the teachers to have a sense of identity as they actually start being very, very proud from their school. And the rate of kids being enrolled for the next year after the implementation of the intervention was amazingly high in comparison. So it was quite a different way of making also an impact, which is more long-lasting than actually a painting or something. So also we have been working on historical centers. We were able to put, even though the Ministry of Culture was not very happy, to be able to add some elements that these ladies and these persons we were always needing to have. And at the end, when they get out from the misa, from the ceremony or the religious ceremony, they will have a space to be and turn the place into a safer and more adequate place. So we do have a document. It's in Spanish, but you can download it from our website. It is guidelines for actually making urban intervention with citizens. It was made with UN Habitat Avina and us. And as I was telling you, I will be asking you to be some kind of making some disobedience, as these people that unknowingly are not following the rules. Well, they do know they are not following, but they do not know that an act like so simple than as stepping on the grass when you have like an absurd sign is actually, it also can be a revolutionary act, you know? So the idea of rebelling to anything that is not right, that affects our way of living, in order of having a common, a public good as a city on our quality of life, then we should be putting some evidence on to transform the cities for people. So whenever you come to Peru or wherever you are, please step in the grass and send us a picture so we can share with others. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. It was very, very interesting, your experience, like the before speaker, Yves. Please, for the people that has been just right now connected to this webinar, remember that at the end of the 3 presentations, we will have a space for make all the questions or comments that you want in the chat space, or directly you can raise your hand and you can ask directly to our speakers. So congratulations, Mariana, and thank you for your presentation. Now, as at last but not least, we have Moritz Ahlert. Willkommen, Moritz. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi.
Hi, Moritz. I will introduce you from your biography. I'm sorry. Moritz Ahlert studied architecture from 2004 to 2009 in Hanover and the University der Künste, University of Arts in Berlin. Since 2017, he is a researcher and lecturer at the Habitat Unit, Chair of International Urbanism and Design from the Professor Meiselwitz Technische Universität from Berlin. Recent teaching activities include the Atlas of Digital Urban Fragments, analyzing the global appropriation of digital tools by civil society actors. He is the author of several publications, most recently Moravia Manifiesto, Coding Strategies for Informal Neighborhoods, Yves Publishers, Berlin, 2018, which he co-edited. He has given lectures, seminars, and workshops at numerous universities worldwide. In 2019, he finished his dissertation with the title Die Vermessenheit von Google Maps, the presumptuousness of Google Maps. Sorry for the pronunciation. My German is okay, but also the translation is from English is a little bit difficult. But Moritz, thank you for being part of this webinar, and please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
As you mentioned, I co-edited this book, the cover you see in the background. And I will talk about the origin and about the process of this project. And one sec. I was invited 2017 to a workshop in Moravia, Colombia. Moravia is a part of Medellin. I will show a lot of pictures in this presentation, and here you see a mapping or a picture of a mapping process of the neighborhood, together with German students, but also with Colombian students and neighbors from this neighborhood. And this was my first interaction with this neighborhood, and also with the group Urban Lab Medellin, which initiated the project where the book was then also published. Exactly. And as you said, I'm part of the Habitat unit since 2017, and my first job or involvement into teaching was to create, together with Albert and Max and Toby and Nina and the initiators of the project, the book together as a kind of documentation, but also as a political tool. I will introduce it now. Here you see some pictures from the first spring school. Also the mapping was part of this 3-week spring school, and yeah. And this book, which we published in 2018, is a kind of summary of this first part of the Urban Lab Medellin, and which also not only documents the process, but also wants to define urban coding process for inclusive participatory project. And here are also named the co-editors. And only to start with the location, where is Moravia? Moravia is in the north of the center of Medellin. It's very close to recent urban renewal projects. It's close to the university, and you can say, if you that the kind of gentrification of the southern neighborhoods also touches now also Moravia, the neighborhood which you can see here, and it's an informal neighborhood, and a lot of people came during the Civil War from whole Colombia, and kind of Moravia was a starting place for many families. And here you see how it looked in the, I think, 70s or 80s, when the landfill, which dominates the neighborhood, was still active. And here you see it burning. The whole neighborhood is informal and built out of found materials. The main jobs of the inhabitants is like informal also, and a lot of people work in recycling and upcycling. And here you see also the Moravia was also already place of some urban interventions from the city municipality. Here you see one side of the landfill, which was covered with houses and sheds. And in 2004, also as a part of a intervention series which touched several parts of the city, it was already transformed into a kind of landscape. Here you see it more in detail, and like also the last project or presentations were talking about participatory approaches, and I think what's the most important in this participatory project is to have like to build trust with the actors. And how do you gain trust? It's like in our project we always include public events, public mesas, public collective analysis, collective action, and public interventions, public presentations, so that this kind of process is always transparent and also inclusive for the people who are kind of interested to get involved into. Then the second part are claims, that these claims are kind of setting a vision, like we said, like in a kind of 10 years time frame, kind of a very understandable understandable language, kind of vision how to transform the neighborhood into a more sustainable neighborhood. And then we designed also together with the neighbors tools to how to transform this neighborhood according to the claims. And as part also of the urban coding process, out of these tools and claims, we developed for specific places scenarios, which in 1 or 2 cases are already are now built in real, and I will show pictures in the end. Like as part of the urban coding process, we also see this project, which is a transformation of an old staircase, which connects the even poorer marginalized part from the rest of the neighborhood, and together with the neighbors and with local companies and with a lot of helping hands, we designed and transformed this dangerous place into a working infrastructure. These are examples of the claims pages, and Some are about economic issues and problems. Some tackle more social issues. Some are more economic driven. So we thought about this urban transformation process from below as a quite holistic one, which includes the perspectives of the neighbors who are actually living there and working there. And these are some pages from the tool segment. And here you can see that they are quite hands-on. They are also tackling economic, social, but also ecological issues, and but also have in some parts like a touristic perspective. And these are some images from student projects which were developed out of it. Like one is on the top of the landfill, and it's a kind of recycling learning center and community space. And these are two housing projects on an empty lot in the neighborhood, which kind of think or reflect kind of this do-it-yourself building mode, which is already happening in this neighborhood and urban surrounding. The book is not only a documentation, but also we see it as a political tool. Here you can see it on a street where Cielo, a member of the Urban Lab Medellin, is holding it and explaining it to tourists, and kind of it's supposed to also create political pressure and building a bridge to the city administration and bring international attention to this neighborhood, and to see not only the problems but also the potentials of this neighborhoods. The neighborhood. This is one project which was created in a similar approach. It's based on neighborhood analysis and the needs and interviews and mapping approach. And then it was also built with neighbors and with students from Colombia, but also from Berlin. And it's a community space on top of a one-store house. And it's yeah, in between use. In the moment we are planning or we are working on a more long-term vision for the Taller Tropical. And on the other side, there's also an urban gardening project. Here you see students and neighbors build together. And yeah, this space is a community space. It serves for workshops, for neighborhood meetings, for cultural activities. And this is us shortly before COVID-19 also hit Europe, but also Latin America. And we did another spring school, and in September there was also like a summer school planned. This time for a bigger slot on the neighborhood to build a kind of eco park, sustainable park on this lot. And there were workshops, and we were also thinking about to plan and build the Taller Tropical here on the top. But unfortunately, due to COVID-19, this was now everything is delayed, as also maybe a lot of other events and summer schools and community activities. Exactly. This is the project, and the urban coding project process wants to tackle or create a more inclusive participatory project. And also I see a lot of common threads with the two presentations before. It's all about co-creation and inferral knowledges which are already existing in these neighborhoods, and it's up to us planners to include them into and not like plan top down to but like to build up on knowledges and practices which are already existing. And this is valid for Moravia, but this is also valid for Brussels, this is also valid for Lima, and this is also valid for Berlin. And this is also kind of one of the core topics we teach and research about at the Habitat Unit in Berlin. And yeah, this was my presentation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Moritz, for your presentation and all this information and experience that you shared with us. So we will begin our space of questions or comments. There are two options. You can write all your questions in the chat space in English or Spanish as you want, or you can raise your hand directly. But we will begin now with the questions in our chat space. So the first question is to Mariana. Mariana, from Yves, you have the informal actions, swimming, grass stepping, economic, etc., of using formal places that are not accepted. Did you also work on public spaces in informal neighborhoods? And even before the settlement is consolidated? Safeguarding public space and importance of public space is in informal neighborhoods. Please, Mariana, feel free to answer this very interesting question from Yves.
Hi, thank you for the question. Our work is all over the city, so we do work a lot in informal areas or less developed areas in the terms of infrastructure. But we also work in more consolidated areas of the city. In both types of scenarios, we do the process in the complete way. So we make people being involved in the process and make them being able to actually defend their place if it is needed to. This way is also a strategy to make people be aware of the value of the public space that they do have, or even if they do not have, where they can demand for and which quality they will demand for, and to actually try to take all the possibilities of the public space, even though it is not a formal public space because it maybe is a vacant lot or whatever, and actually bring it to life so people can use it. So we work everywhere, and we're happy to share some other resources. We actually have in the website some modules for different types of public spaces, like, I don't know, bike lanes or bus stops or others that also are in need to be transformed.
Thank you. We have a second question to Moritz on the tension between top and down and bottom up. How could top-down interventions be more interactive with the neighborhood and meet bottom-up needs? Moritz, please.
I think partly of what I just showed now, that if you plan something as a city municipality, that you kind of react to the needs of the inhabitants, which are actually make use of the space in the end, and then that you include them from the beginning on, that you start with an open question and an open research. What actually do the neighborhood or the city needs, and then come up with proposals. And yeah, the reality is different, and like the decisions, the interventions I showed in Moravia are not so bad. Like the cultural center really works, and also the rest is quite designed nicely. But I think we are all know bad examples of city interventions from above. And so I think there should be more awareness and more openness for state top-down interventions, to start with open questions about the needs of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Moritz. So we have a third question from Camila Costa. Hello, everyone from Argentina. Question to Professor Yves Schoonjans. Maybe I didn't quite understand the conditions of those waiting spaces. Can you tell us more about them, where they are, what is the domain condition? And thank you. Please, Yves.
Okay, so what we have is that in many cities, in Brussels, but also probably in a lot of cities, terrains are being bought by private investors, are being bought by local governments or by different kind of actors. But the project itself is taking a very long time, which means that those kind of, let's say, spaces, kind of terrains are empty for a very long time. So this could be months, this could be years, it could be decades even. And the fact that all those cities in Europe, probably also in Latin America, you have this kind of opportunity of using those spaces in a very temporary way. It's a kind of an idea that popped up in the kind of 90s, that perhaps it would be interesting not only to think about the kind of a project at the end, but as a kind of what is the intermediate period between the now and the status of the terrain now, and finally when the project is being handled. A lot of private investors are not very eager to do that for many different reasons, of economic reasons and of formal reasons within our law system. But especially probably governments should at least take this into account. So what is the condition? The condition are really wastelands. There are wastelands in the sense that they're also not giving a very safe environment. They've been used in different kind of ways. They're not seen as being safe, although perhaps they are very safe, but they're not seen as being safe because they're wild places. So it's not, the idea is not to clean everything up because the city needs wild places, but once in a while you should use those spaces for the communities.
So thank you, Yves. Yes, I don't know if there's another comment, please, or somebody wants to talk. Yeah. Okay, there are more questions from Javier Mendez to the three speakers. How can these processes of participatory design integrate top-down and bottom-up initiatives? What is the role of the academia in articulating politics, decision-making, and citizen participations? Maybe the first part of this question was already questioned by, asked by Yves, but please, I would like if first, ladies first, Mariana could begin asking, then Yves, and finally Moritz. Please, Mariana.
Thank you very much. So I think it is two processes that we need to address. One, it is the idea of the possibility, the different power that different actors have. So you need to be very clear about that. So for example, if you have some academics or universities or so, they will have some values. They are going to be having probably ordered or a lot of their time oriented on the process. They will have a lot of enthusiasm, no? But also they will have a term that will finish. And in our cases, when we work with the universities, the process at the end always took more. So we end up having the students, for example, being involved in the project for like maybe 1 month or maybe more in the process. So you need to be clear on that, so you can demand, and also you can state what is going to be the commitment. And if you are not able to, as a student or as an academic group, to be committed to the end, then you need to establish the process that will be within the term and the time of day that they have available. And that also is the same for the different people involved. You will have neighbors that will be there forever, but at the same time they will not have a lot of time, and they will be having maybe struggles in between them. So it is very important to actually get to know the person, which is the second, or the actor, which is the second element. You need to gather what they need, what they need to be more efficient, or to be able to actually address the process or the objective that you are looking for, and to be very clear. We also try to make some like a small, it's called in Spanish, ¿cómo se llama? Convenio de hoja de compromisos, like a commitment act. So everyone knows what are they committing to and what resources they have. I don't know, maybe it's time, maybe it's the communal venue, maybe is using the municipality to store stuff or whatever. So it is very important to do that and to be flexible, because the changes will be. So we also work with a group of Ocupa Tu Calle volunteers, and also we hire people, of course. We hire people to be able to not only lead the processes or maybe make the measurement processes, but also to all the technical part. No, you will have maybe lots of nice and well-intentioned students of architecture, but probably more than the half will not be able to actually nail a wood with a hammer, and they will, smash their fingers or so. So you need to bring technical people that will work for the process to make it also happen with less fingers being broken.
Okay, so perhaps you know this this what we call the ladder of participation. It's by Einstein, not Einstein, Arnstein, which is on the lowest ladder. You have what we could call the kind of shady participation, which normally, because in the Western context, it's even almost legally that you do go for participation. So the kind of lowest step is that you have a hearing, and the local government or the government is showing the kind of plans, and you can give comments, and the kind of tactic is often that you have a lot of people there, so you have a lot of different opinions, so at the end you can just do what you want, until you go to on the top of the ladder, where you have like a full participation and a lot of in-betweens. So I guess probably to create a kind of real participation, you need, of course, because participation is on the level of different actors, so governments should be aware that they are one of the actors, and they should act accordingly, and should, of course, believe in the participation, because not everybody believes in the participation, especially because often participation is being misused in the kind of first steps of that ladder. So if you believe as a community or as a government in that kind of participation, there's one step above. And what we see in Belgium, that especially the kind of what we call local governments or lower governments are more interested in participation than the high governments, which probably tackle also quite more difficult issues and are not being eager. A second element why not to use participation, although they have to, is of course where we are in a very legal system that very quickly everybody can go towards court, and a lot of the decisions are being held on because of also because of private, also because of public, but also because of private reasons. The function of academics is difficult and not, because they could be facilitators in a kind of in-between between the different actors, and because also academics often do applied research, they give guidelines, develop best practices, but it's always a very difficult issue just to tackle, of course.
Thank you, Yves. And Moritz, please.
I think one role of academia is also to bring in like future planner into the field and making them aware of for whom they are planning and building in the future, and to kind of bring them in the field and to gather kind of different knowledges is, in my opinion, very important to get a kind of holistic perspective of possible uses of the spaces. But academia is also kind of, if you want, a third space, which is a bit, or has a different economic pressure than maybe like in the real world. And there you can experiment and you can do open research, you can really ask open questions, and therefore, and you can also, like in our case, integrate international perspectives in like a very local specific context, which a normal planning process wouldn't allow. And it's not only, also in our case, it was not like a one-way street. We always ask also, what can we learn from Moravia and bring back to Berlin and Kreuzberg, and like to have this kind of knowledge exchange, which I think was very sustainable also in terms of the future perspective of the students, and of course also for us.
Thank you, Moritz. I would like also add a quick comment. Just to congratulate Felix and Javier, because the combination of the three speakers that we have here and their experiences are really, really, how to say, successful in the process of understanding different types of approaches. If you noted, Yves and Moritz, Yves and Mariana are locals. They are working in their countries, on their cities, and Moritz is, like to say, foreign, working in a case study in other country. So there are two types of approaches from academia and from ONGs working on field in this context of rethinking co-production of public space and participatory processes. So I have another questions from Maria Augusta Hermida from Cuenca, is a friend and colleague here from Ecuador. For Mariana and Moritz, some people say that these interventions do not solve the structural problem of the great social and economic differences that exist in Latin America. What could you say about this? Please, Mariana first.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Augusta. I think there's two answers for this. First, if you are referring to the processes that, for example, Moritz and we present, then I'll say you that, of course, it will not be the solution to any structural problems, because we're not working on public policies nor developing major interventions on, for example, neighborhoods. But the second question will be that if you are referring to some other interventions that may look similar to what Moritz and I have presented, but that will not have nor the care, nor the involvement, the real involvement of the citizenship, and the end of the process will be like the nice picture from the painting, and so at the end of whatever they will be, then I'll say that also do not serve not only for the structural problem, but not will serve at all for like nothing that will be long lasting. That's why when I show the graph with the circles, I was saying that the public space intervention was actually more in the middle than at the end, because for us, the public space transformation is more of a tool to make another type of transformation within public policies, private practices, or society and citizenship. So this is the idea, and I'm aware that despite this type of processes being put in some headlights or some lights on it, is a lot of organizations that are making their work with the people and with communities have been now starting to be compared with some, like, I don't know, publicity or production events, companies or so, that will ask, and we have a lot of requests of that, hey, Mariana, can you make this place better, like for next weekend? And I say, no, we're not a company that produces events or fairs. If you want that, go and ask the one that make the whatever activity for Coca-Cola or so, because our processes lasts a lot. They could take, in some cases, 3 or 4 months, but some cases like 1 or 2 years. It depends on which is the processes, and in that cases also it is a expensive process, even though the materials or the equipment used is not like public works, and it's not so hard, and of course not so expensive. The community approach and the idea of working with people in a real basis, it is expensive because it takes a lot of time for a lot of people. It's expensive in terms of hiring people, but also in terms of using time of the neighbors and others that may not charge you, but may invest a lot of what they have. And saying this, also I want to make one comment. When the government start making this kind of processes, you can react by 2 ways. You can backlash them, saying, hey, you are not taking care of the structural problems or so, because of course with some small intervention it will not be solved. But also you could congratulate them and say, okay, so do not forget these structural problems and keep going on doing this good in a good way. And I know that, for example, in Medellin, the last government was very bad making bike lanes and some spaces and a lot, and the governments, they do not have the flexibility that we as intermediates, as civil society and as citizens have. They have a lot to be on the bureaucracy side, to take care of, and they should, of course, but sometimes for them it's not as easy. With saying that, I'm not saying that you should pass whatever garbage public space they are going to give you. Of course not, you have to demand them, it will be good. But I say that it's better for trying to make them work with people and the communities and the person that knows, than to only say, okay, I don't like you because you are the other ideology, and then I will say that everything you do is bad. And I want to be clear, that does not take your right and your opinion to keep saying that the government is crappy, but you try to use the effort, even though it is a lousy or silly or a little bit torpe, I don't know, effort to actually make the transformations last, which is the risk on having this not well done. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Mariana. And now from Moritz, how was your experience here in Colombia? I hope it was well, but I'm sure that it was totally different. The theory, the differences between the theory and the practice here, especially in our countries. So please, Moritz.
I would completely agree to Mariana, what she said. And like in our context, I would say the interventions, we know that they are kind of changing not the structural problems, but kind of we aimed with these interventions and with our actions to kind of put the neighborhood on the map, which is not really existing on the map of the municipality because it's just illegal. And to show with international attention that there's something going on, and there's what kind of what you can also learn from the neighborhood, and what are the qualities, and that, and then the aim is to kind of force the administration to rework their urban renewal plan, which then hopefully respects more the existing neighborhood. So kind of, and so also the book, as I mentioned, serves as a political tool as well, but also kind of on different levels. But also towards the city government, that they kind of acknowledging what's already existing there, and that it's not kind of a blank spot in the city to develop it, but to respect what's already there.
Can I also add something?
Yeah, for sure, Yves, please.
Okay, I guess within our research group, we're having quite a lot of talks about the importance of public space in informal settlements. And of course, we realize and we know that we cannot give answers to really structural problems of economic, social, hunger, violence, and so on, in the sense that, but we do believe that public spaces are an important element into the informal settlements, although we do not give answers to really some important social issues. But the belief that there is a kind of a neighborhood, and the neighborhood can make a community, and that community has a right to make a community. And also by this right, they also give those people sometimes a kind of dignity, what I also tried to show in our project, giving the dignity back to those homeless people to become a neighbor again, which doesn't, of course, we also have to try to stimulate others and ourselves to try to give structural solutions towards hunger and so. Informal neighborhoods, especially in the beginning when they're not really consolidated, that of course we need healthy water, of course we need to get rid of the black water, of course we need electricity, of course we need a lot of different, let's say, basics, but at the same time we also believe to make a community, we need public spaces. And of course, you could say at the end, those happy colors are nice, and you could also refer to the PPS, the project of the public spaces, where also you could give a kind of a critique that they always use the same, let's say, tools to where, and at the end you see renders of happy people and happy children and old and young and different colors and so on, which also is probably much too Jan Gehl and not in the reality of the informal spaces and the informal settlements. But it's an interesting discussion.
Sure. It's totally agree, Yves. So we have also here a comment. Thank you very much to Professor Schoonjans. Now in Argentina, we are having trouble with illegal and land occupancy. At the same time, we have high needs of social housing. And your proposal, it's very interesting and innovative for those kind of territories and lots. This comment is from Camila Costa.
Perhaps can I just add, of course, there is a very big difference between Latin America, or let's say the global south and the global north, is that in our case, informality is not accepted. Well, it is accepted in some point, and there is an informality happening more and more, which we cherish. But those kind of informality of land, illegal land occupation, hardly it can be done in Brussels. It can be done a bit by Roma gypsies or what by other groups, but in a very limited way. So I guess this in Argentina, those are much. It's a kind of different setting.
Yes, thank you, Yves. And I have to say, I would like to add just one comment for the discussion. is that I was really impressed with all the three presentations. And in the case of Yves, these words remains me here in mind, co-creativity, in terms of the co-creation process and these living labs that should be developed in close relation with people. But you mentioned, Yves, that in this case, people, homeless people in your city, should be prepared, or in terms of what they will be they will co-produce or assessed by this, in this case, by your students. Could you please add a little bit about this topic?
Sorry, there was a kind of mishap in the communication. Can you repeat the last?
I'm sorry. Yes, no, sorry. It's about these terms that you used in your presentation, in the conclusions, especially when you talk about solidarity, about the co-creation process and these living labs. You mentioned that people should be prepared, or like they have like a teaching process of showing what they will be like, be part of this. Could you please explain a little bit more about that? Because maybe here in Latin America, we could understand these methodologies like, okay, we make like a capacitation process, but it's not only that, it's also going close with them and be part of our living lab. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that, please?
First, I think it's important when you have this kind of living lab and you have this co-creation, and you believe that all partners have knowledge. At the same time, they all have different kind of knowledges. So it's important that it's not, we don't fall in the trap of the 70s that everybody should do the same. Of course, architects still remain architects, urban designers still remain urban designers, and have an expertise on that. But it's the openness towards the different partners, and the kind of openness and interaction that precisely give a kind of an added value. Precisely on the teaching issue is a bit perhaps strange, in the sense that, of course, those homeless people have been fallen out of the grid for several reasons. It could be drugs, it could be mishaps in society and whatsoever. And because they're falling into the grid, and those in the NGOs really help those people to get back into the grid. Often they don't have any skilled profession, so those kind of skill buildings are meant to give them towards a kind of a job, but also to give them a kind of guidance to get onto the grid. But it seems a bit, I don't know, I don't want to call it like a really education, and because then you get again like we educate the homeless people towards a kind of better. I think it's a kind of teaching process for all. So we also have to see it as a teaching process for the students and a teaching process for the teachers, also to learn different ways of just acting and learn different ways of what we call in Belgium and probably all over the world, like the endless learning or the life learning. So I don't want to be patronizing homeless people that you have to teach them.
Thank you, Yves. So if there is no more comments and questions, I think they are not in the chat space.
Ricardo, may I say something, please?
Mariana is waiting, yes.
Yes, please. Please.
Yes,
sorry.
it is in regards what are the differences on our cities here in Latin America, and from what just Yves have said a bit before, we have to have really clear that our cities have been made by citizens. So the citizen urbanism have been gone forever. That's the way, with the lack of government, with the lack of investment, that people have made their houses, their habitats, and their public spaces. So it is not something new that is coming. rather than a visibilization of the processes and a recognition of how the city is produced, or was produced and is continuing to be produced, and because of the lack of public policies for social housing and so. And in that way, it is why we were willing to be able to make clear that in Latin America, the process has been done forever, and that people's hands has been the ones that have been shaping the cities. So that's also why we speak in Spanish. We talk about urbanismo ciudadano, placemaking, otros. That's also because of the characteristics of our own urban space. So.
Yes, totally agree. Our process of consolidation and growing our cities are different. Thank you, Mariana, for your comment, and thank you, Yves. So, another question, please. You can write in the. Andres Jurado is raising his hand. I'm sorry for not looking your hands raising. I'm just trying to find them here. So, Andres, please. You can ask in Spanish or in English as you want.
No, it's okay. It's okay in English. First, it's a question to Yves and Moritz. First of all, it's really nice, the presentation. So first to Yves, you talk about the design of strategies. It's more important than the final product. And also Moritz talk about the importance of the strategies implemented with the help of the community. Once said this, I have three questions. First, knowing that the strategies are born to solve the problem, is there times when the solution creates more problems? Is there sometimes that you have to create a strategy just to solve another strategy? Or is this making some like final product inefficient? Or is there sometimes that you have to these problems? And the second, is there a specific order to create the strategies? Like maybe I see this like an equation. Strategy 1 plus strategy 2 is a final product. So is there a times that you have to order in the most efficient way, or you just reflect the strategy and then the final product is just give it like for the strategies, or you like seriously have to design or you test the order to make the most efficient final product? And the third one is actually the strategies. Well, we'll talk about the strategies in a most micro way, like a micro overview to solve a problem. Is there sometimes like you have to like you can copy these solutions to solve same problems or similar problems in neighbor places, and maybe these products can rearrange, and maybe they can join to reflect in a more macro overview? How can you reflect the strategies in a more macro overview to attack a more big problem? And that's my three questions. First,
thank you.
Maybe Moritz.
Oh no, Andres, please let do it first, because they were long. So I think Yves, maybe could you answer please the three questions, and then we made the other questions for Moritz. Please.
No.
Do you remember the three questions?
No, because there are not easy questions, of course. Okay. In the sense that what I try to say is that, of course, architects are still designing buildings, are still. We believe that often they also have to try to learn to design strategies, and it's an ongoing process in the sense that we don't have a very clear. So in the same way that you don't have a very clear, let's say, a methodology to design a building, we don't have a clear methodology to design strategies. Of course, it's like in the design studio, and we are trying let's say, trying students to stimulate to design different kind of strategies, and at some point trying to evaluate them. This was one of the aims of the summer school in Ecuador that didn't happen because of COVID, but we use it in other summer schools in Bolivia and in Paraguay, where we started to do the analysis of the kind of let's say small cities that we were looking at, and to see what kind of issues are popping up, what kind of problems are popping up, and at some point you're starting to make strategies or to try to develop kind of possibilities. So it's an important question. That there are three important questions, but I don't have any very quick answer to that. Yeah, designing what he asked, can you design a strategy for designing a strategy? I don't have a full answer on that. Perhaps Moritz has an answer from the Urban Lab.
No, thank you. It's perfect. Andres, I don't know if your question was answered, but it's a living lab, so we are learning, and strategies change and could be different in terms of the case study or the place. So Andres, your question, please, for Moritz.
Oh, so the question, like the second question for Moritz is there a specific order of strategies? Like we all know that when we join the strategies, that gives us the final product. Like you test the order to the strategies to make the most efficient product, or it just creates like by itself?
As I tried, thank you very much, Andres, for your question. Like as I tried to explain with this urban coding diagram, that we of course start with like identify together with the community the needs of the community. So I would say it's no matter what kind of level of strategy, if micro scale or the big scale, you should start to start questioning what's actually the purpose of the intervention or the project or the strategy, and start with the needs of the community or neighborhood or with the city, and to broaden up your own perspectives and to bring in different existing knowledges. I think this is like for me, and then integrate it into more top-down planning strategies. This would make the most sense to me, like to start with identifying the needs and questioning the actual purpose of the planning project. But what's come after this is kind of the open process, which is also part of the strategy, that you kind of are allowed to ask questions, and that there is not like a kind of clear from A to B solution, but that you're kind of also, if you don't find right away a solution, that you can have also the ability to go back to the starting point and ask again questions, that there's no kind of a straight outcome. And therefore, yeah, I hope I answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Moritz. Perfect. I think there are no more questions. I checked the chat and I check also the participants list. I want to say thank you to all of you, the three speakers, and also to all the people that could join us today in this webinar. I just want to share ¿Puedo compartir? No. Ya, voy a compartir. No, no puedo compartir. So no problem. I just want to say thank you to all of you. Please remember we have our fourth seminar, our fourth session tomorrow morning here in Ecuador and tomorrow afternoon in Europe. Here is the link where you can access to all the sessions and presentations of all related to the webpage of SURLab. And thank you to all of you three speakers. It was a very interesting and inspiring session. I really admire your work on field and also on teaching and working on this topic. And we are extremely happy to rethink the co-production of public space and public participation in this case, and especially in this session. Thank you very much to all of you, and see you in the next session tomorrow morning in Ecuador time and tomorrow afternoon in European time. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Moritz. Thank you. Yves and Mariana.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Me gusta. Nice to meet
Bye.
you too. Bye. Yves, bye. See you later. See you tomorrow. We don't hear you. Ya se fue.